everybody. Hi, I'm Alexis.
And I'm Christian, and we are Tiny House Expedition. Thanks for dropping by our tiny house today. You must be here because you're looking for some tiny house information, and we are those people that have that.
It's true.
Yep.
We're nerds.
She's a nerd.
So browse our videos, and if you can't find what you're looking for, leave us a comment, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you may or may not know, but for about 4.5 years, we traveled basically nonstop with our tiny house. We were full-time nomadic dwellers. We clocked over 55,000 miles with our house, crisscrossing the United States and just into Canada also. And during our travels, we had the pleasure of connecting with a lot of other nomads, especially Skoolie dwellers. And do you know what a Skoolie is? Do you know what a Skoolie
I know
is?
what a Skoolie is.
What is it?
It's a school bus conversion. It's when you take a school bus of a certain size, it can be 40 feet long or 20 feet long, and turn it into a mobile dwelling.
That's right. Basically converting it into a tiny home. Some people would say it's like a cross between an RV and a tiny house on wheels. But most of the folks we met lived in theirs full time.
Today we're going to do a comparison of Skoolies versus tiny houses on wheels and see if one of them's right for you.
We've certainly fallen in love with quite a few Skoolies. We get around. I think we said that already. But let's take a look at how they're similar, how they're different, and pros and cons of each. And first off, let's say Skoolies and tiny houses on wheels have a ton in common.
Totally, a ton.
I like to think of both of them in many ways as like renegade living on wheels. You know, they're quirky, custom, tiny homes. You know, tiny homes come in many forms, and one just happens to be on a bus frame and the other happens to be on a trailer frame. So right off the bat, you know, you can see there's a lot of commonalities and just like a lot of passion for simple, minimalist living life on your own terms. These are things that come to mind when I think about both of these kinds of tiny homes.
Also, a Skoolie and a tiny house are pretty much the same in square footage. They can be about the same width, and they can be from 16 to 40 feet long. So both of them. So they're, in that way, they're very, very similar.
And both in a rectangular footprint.
Yeah.
Not gonna find any square Skoolies or square tiny houses on wheels.
No,
Oh, and if you're going to build it yourself, you can build either one for typically between 15 and say 30, 35,000.
Yeah, that'll get you pretty nice tiny house or Skoolie. So now it's time to talk about some of the pros and cons of a Skoolie versus a tiny house. So one big pro for a tiny house is the interior height. So you can put lofts in a tiny house. Our house is on a 20-foot trailer, and we have 2 lofts. So that increases our square footage quite a bit.
The Skoolie, they come typically in 6 to 6.5 feet, the standard model. But you can raise the roof to get even more livable space, but it comes at a pretty hefty price point. In fact, if you want to get a professional roof raise, it will probably set you back about $8,000 to $10,000. That's for like 14 extra inches. Unless you know welding, then you could do it yourself if you follow some very careful how-to guides. There's a lot more information available now than ever.
Doing the construction in a tiny house is pretty forgiving because it's all wood. So if you make a mistake, you can take it apart and put it back together again the right way. And you can do that inside a Skoolie, but on the outside, it's a metal shell. So if you make a hole in something in the wrong place, it is much harder to fix that mistake, especially if you're not a welder.
Yeah, I guess that's much like the difference between a tiny house on wheels and a container home, which if you haven't seen that comparison video, check it out in the link
Up here.
above.
And yes, there are metal frame tiny houses, but all of the decisions have been made before you assemble the whole metal structure on a tiny house trailer, because you've thought of where the windows and doors and all of that are going to go. And all the ones I've seen, metal frames, have been basically you assemble it to that spec.
Yeah, so I guess in a way that's less forgiving and more similar to a Skoolie.
Yeah.
I suppose if you screw up, you can get a new metal wall made.
I'm not sure.
To be continued.
Yes.
So if you're interested in being a full-time nomad, which could mean traveling once a week or once a month, a Skoolie could be a good choice for you. No towing required.
Yeah, you just kind of hop in the driver's seat, turn it on, and take off. And that is not like a tiny house at all.
Yeah, it's closer to like a converted van in a lot of ways. You still need to tie down some stuff and make sure things are secured.
Yeah.
But it's ready to go. Where tiny house, like when we would travel, we got really good at it. Like 15 to 20 minutes and we could be ready, wheels up on the road. Mm-hmm. That's not bad. No. But I feel like some of our Skoolie friends could cut that down in half.
At least. Yeah, absolutely.
The thing about a tiny house on wheels is it's not attached to an engine, which means you need a tow vehicle. Mm-hmm. So if you want to travel regularly, you need to own your own beefy truck.
Yeah.
Or if you're lucky like these two folks, we got a sponsorship from U-Haul, which is a really great DIY option, but only for the occasional move.
Right. Something 10,000 pounds or under.
Absolutely. So your cost then is your house and your truck.
Right.
Now, if you're a tiny house stroller who doesn't want to move all the time, then that's not such a big deal.
Being attached to an engine can be a blessing and a curse. For sure. Because if for some reason your Skoolie breaks down, one, you're in your house, so it's all right. It's cool. It's fine. I'm here. I'm in my house. But if it needs to be towed somewhere, oh my God.
Or what about spending a week in a shop?
Yeah, you'd absolutely have to spend time at a shop.
Maybe they'll be really cool, let you hang out.
Yeah. And I've heard that happen before, so it can definitely happen. But being attached to that engine can be a little bit of a downfall.
So depending on what bus you score, how old it is, what the model is, how many miles,
what engine it has,
all those things, it might break down more often than you would like, and those are not cheap repairs from what I've heard.
Yeah, and guess what? It's usually a diesel. I mean, I think all buses are diesel. So you have to go to a diesel mechanic. So that means a truck mechanic, not just the car mechanic down the street. So you could be in the middle of nowhere that there is no mechanic. So that's another thing you got to keep in mind.
A tiny house trailer, on the other hand, so we traveled, like we said, 55,000 plus miles. Mm-hmm. We did have some repairs done on one occasion to our trailer. Mm-hmm.
On December 23rd, because we broke down on the highway in Oklahoma.
Sallisaw, Oklahoma.
Sallisaw, Oklahoma. And so Christmas Eve, our house should be up and going again. I hope.
Yeah, hopefully we can get to my parents' house.
Let me show you Sallisaw. There it is.
So sweet.
We certainly had a lot of flat tires, so we
yeah, we did.
Just full disclosure, we had plenty of flat tires. But that one-time repair is a lot cheaper than, let's say, even 5 repairs over a course of the same amount of years that you might expect in a Skoolie. Or maybe you'll get lucky.
So another big pro that I've seen with Skoolies is that families can travel really easily in a Skoolie. It's so easy to make 6 bunk beds in a Skoolie. We've seen families of, with 4 kids, so 6 of them?
Yeah.
There was one with 7.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I do love seeing traveling families. Uh-huh. And we've seen some amazing layouts, and especially in the big buses and the 40-footers.
Yeah, the 40-footers, yeah.
Where you have a master bedroom and then a separate kids bedroom.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty incredible. And actually, I've seen maybe some better family designs in Skoolies than I have even tiny houses on wheels.
Totally.
And especially if you want to travel with the family, to have a tiny house on wheels large enough to accommodate more than one child is going to be very difficult in a house that you can take on the road because of how it affects weight and gas mileage and maneuverability. Where a big school bus is still a boat to drive.
Yeah, it's
right?
yeah, it's still a big thing, but it's already made to carry a lot of weight.
That's true.
And you already have the space, so you just fill in the space with everything that you need.
We all know that a tiny house on wheels can have trouble finding parking. It's out there, you just have to hunt for it. It might not be in your favorite absolute spot, but there are a lot of options, short and long term, for tiny houses on wheels. Backyards, RV parks, campgrounds, tiny house communities, even on your own land in some cases. There's legal parking options for tiny houses on wheels. You know, it has to meet certain qualifications, oftentimes has to be certified. But now there's a growing number of cities that will accept a tiny house as a full-time residence, oftentimes in a backyard setting.
And the opposite of that with a Skoolie. Skoolies do have a hard time finding places to park. A lot of times you can park at RV parks, but RV parks are privately owned. They can turn down tiny houses, Skoolies, and RVs if they want. And a lot of times they do of a certain age with an RV. Even with an RV certified Skoolie, you might have a hard time finding a place to park it. With Skoolies being parked on public lands like BLM land a lot, they are usually decked out in everything that they need to survive off-grid. So that means probably a lot of solar and some big holding tanks, which, an underside of a bus has a lot of room to put things like that. So you have that advantage over a tiny house because you're usually less worried about weight in a bus because it holds so many seats and so many people, it can hold a lot of weight. You are looking at more cost to do that as opposed to being a tiny house plugged into the grid and plugged into something like water.
Convenience cost.
Yeah, that's what that is. Convenience. Yep.
You could do some low cost alternatives, but you're just going to have, less creature comforts. That's what it really comes down
totally.
to.
Yeah, you might not get a hot shower. And a lot of times you want one, so.
We've boondocked our tiny house a few times, which was trickier for us, definitely, than the school bus.
Totally.
But there's been times where we watched a movie like in the middle of nowhere. Hello.
With lights on.
Yeah.
Ooh, look at that. And eating some dinner. TV's on, but first. And
it's luxury.
It is luxury.
We're like, wow,
This is super cool.
I feel rich.
Yeah.
But we do know a lot of Skoolie folks who spend a lot of time on BLM, public-owned lands, national forests, and they live out there pretty much full time. So that is certainly possible. It's a very specific kind of lifestyle that can be freeing and wonderful and also challenging. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing about the Skoolies versus tiny house at the end of the day is what feels right to you. And I do know, you can more easily get into a school bus at a much lower price point, especially, I'm talking DIY options. Yes. Because you can buy a school bus for cheaper than you can buy a tiny house trailer.
Yeah, that's true. That's totally true. Yeah.
The cost of conversions can go up and up, but it can be as simple as you like, or it can be as fancy as you want.
Yeah.
I mean, the price range is unreal.
Yeah, it's totally unreal.
For either option, to be honest.
Yeah, if you want $100,000 pimped out Skoolie, you can have that.
Totally. And actually, we really get a kick out of going to campgrounds or even festivals where you're surrounded by vans, buses, tiny houses, RVs, and you'll be like, okay, from $5,000 to $200,000.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I dig, you know.
Yeah, it's always awesome to see the range, but we're kind of at the lower end of that range for sure. Yeah.
So, what feels right to you? Do you want a school bus conversion? Mm-hmm. It doesn't even have to be a school bus, to be honest. It could be a shuttle bus, an activity bus. Yeah. There's all kinds of buses. Mm-hmm. Or do you want a tiny house on wheels The design potential for each is pretty incredible, but you know, definitely think long and hard about those pros and cons and what's suitable for you and what you're willing to deal with. Like, are you out to seek adventure? Do you want to be away from society a little bit more? If you're good with that, you know, if that sounds appealing to you, Skoolie might be right.
Skoolie might be in our future too. You never know.
Never know.
Need an adventure vehicle.
But yeah, there's lots of love about each. We'd love to hear from you about what you like, what you chose or thinking of choosing. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, totally. So leave some questions if you have any in the comments below, and we can answer them, but we'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Thank you for watching our video and for stopping by Tiny House Expedition. I'm Alexis.
And I'm Christian. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And for more tiny home tours and stories, click the videos below.
And join us on Patreon for bonus content,
including face-to-face conversations with us. We hope to see you there.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.